This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome in to another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. Today, a conversation with Representative Liana Cassar, who wants to be the next Speaker of the House here in Rhode Island. All right, so first of all, I want to thank everyone who was with me throughout Election Day. We started here in Providence, made our way around the state, spoke with outgoing Speaker Mattiello, incoming Representative Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, made our way down to the woods of Richmond, over to Newport, spoke with Senator Whitehouse, Congressman Cicilline, and then back to the studio broadcasting throughout the night as news was breaking, so to speak. And we didn't really have concrete details on election night, although it became increasingly clear that Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung was going to upset Speaker Mattiello in House District 15. I was actually down at the Cranston Republican headquarters and caught up with Barbara Ann that evening, and they told me they were just hanging tight, she and Mayor Fung. They were just hanging tight, waiting for concrete results. And, of course, the next day, Speaker Mattiello did concede the election, and, of course, that means he will obviously lose the speakership, and it opens up the opportunity for a new Speaker of the House. Now, I'm putting this episode out on a Thursday. We're going to get back to our regularly scheduled programming next week. I know it's been all over the place. Obviously, we did daily pods last week. Then this week, I had my election preview with Jim Hummel on Monday. And today, this is a Thursday, of course, that this episode is coming out. The reason I'm doing this is because tonight, the House Democratic Caucus is meeting in Warwick. And the word is they're going to elevate Majority Leader Joe Shekarchi to Speaker of the House tonight. So I wanted to get this episode with Rep Cassar in this morning, this afternoon here on Thursday. And of course, even if you're listening to this on Friday, it still is excellent context, but figured I'd get it out before tonight's meeting of the minds in Warwick. I'll be there, by the way, and you can follow along at Bill Bartholomew on Twitter and Instagram, or in the Bartholomew Town Facebook group. You get there by going to btown.stream, and I'll be bringing you the latest on the ground as the House Democrats make moves on their next speaker. But going back even before the election, now we're talking a couple of weeks ago, Representative Cassar came forward and said, hey, look, I want to throw my name into the ring to become Speaker of the House. And she certainly brings a different perspective, a different demographic, obviously, than the typical Rhode Island Speaker of the House. And more than anything, as you'll hear in this episode, she wants to have an actual dialogue, an actual election that features multiple viable candidates. So will she have the votes? Will she be able to pull people off of the list that Joe Shekarchi has put forward in his camp? That remains to be seen. But a fascinating perspective from Rep Cassar here today, and I think is really informative going into tonight's Democratic caucus. So, again, we'll keep you posted. btown.stream, Twitter, at Bill Bartholomew. I'll be in the room as decisions are made tonight by the Democratic caucus as to who may become the next Speaker of the House. But you don't know what's going to happen, and we'll stay on top of this story as it continues to develop. So, once again, obviously, looking at the election, the presidential election, I just got a text here as I'm recording this that Biden got Arizona. That's what the text says. So here it is, 10:43 in the morning on Thursday, and my friend texting me with the shark emoji with the brain exploding out of the top of it. Biden gets Arizona, 6 points to 270. Well, we'll see how that plays out as well. And, of course, with the presidential election, this thing is going to play itself out in the courts, right? We're looking at Bush v. Gore, which I remember vividly. That was probably the first campaign I was fully plugged into. I was in high school and just fascinated by the process and the way that the court system ultimately decided that. You got to think that we're heading in a similar direction here, although perhaps the margins will widen in Biden's favor as recounts occur, or the counts continue, I should even say. Fascinating stuff. Elections, you can't beat them, right? It's what B-Town was born out of back in 2018. And I should note before we go to the interview that this is a listener-supported program. There's a few ways that you can support Bartholomew Town. One is to leave a rating and review wherever you're listening right now. Another way, you can share this episode or any of the other 250-plus episodes on social media. And if you want to go a step further, you can become a B-Town Insider. Now, you do this by heading to patreon.com/BartholomewTown. You'll find the opportunity to contribute as little as $3 per month to help sustain the independent journalism, opinion, analysis, and entertainment that we've become known for in the Ocean State and beyond. At the $10 per month level, you'll get exclusive content, including commentary from myself and commentary from folks like Ted Nesi, Ian Donis, Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. Why not become a B-Town Insider, take it a step further, and you really help to support the bedrock of this operation. You know, the hosting fees, the HD fees that we use to do our interviews by Zoom, some of the live streaming stuff that's going on. So really appreciate all of you who have done it thus far. And if you can, it's there for you. Patreon.com/BartholomewTown. I'll also say one last thing. Lots of new stuff coming in 2021. We've got, obviously, the Rhode Island PBS weekly series, which I am one of the 3 reporters on. We're going to be doing some in-depth, well, we've already been doing it, but you're going to start to see some in-depth television journalism from myself, Bill Rapoli, and Michelle San Miguel, each of them formerly of NBC 10 here in Rhode Island. That's going to premiere in a week on Rhode Island PBS, and I'll be sharing that all over social media as well. And a new podcast series coming in 2021. Look out. And if you want to get involved in any of this stuff, if you think you'd like to be a sponsor, you know somebody who would, Bill, BILL, at RIPodcast.com. Okay, let's get to it. She wants to be the next Speaker of the House. Here she is, Liana Cassar. All right, so let's get right into it.
Okay.
We had a obviously the main race, quote unquote, locally that most eyes were on was House District 15. Could Barbara Ann Fenton Fung defeat Speaker Mattiello in that House race? And as election night started to move along, it became increasingly clear that the Speaker would in fact be losing his seat, which of course opens up the door to a new Speaker. Now, prior to that, you had come out and indicated that regardless of the outcome of that HD 15 race, you had an interest in becoming Speaker of the House. So can you kind of walk us back pre-election day, take us through your thought process, you know, sort of the coalition that you had in mind to achieve a possible speakership, and then walk us through where you're at right now. We're taping on a Thursday. Tonight, there's going to be some sort of caucusing or some sort of meeting of the minds, if you will, around the possible speakership of Majority Leader Shekarchi. So
Sure.
Let's go before any of the activities in HD 15, though, on election day.
Yeah, I think for anyone who has been elected to the state rep seat for any district, your first experience the day after your successful election is to be thrown into a speaker race, or some sense that all of a sudden, all that focus you had for months and months, knocking on doors, convincing people that you would, stand up for everyone and not settle for the status quo and not go along to get along. As soon as that election is over, you end up with a decision about whether or not you go with the status quo. And prior to my election in 2018, some fabulous folks who were already in the House were organizing to try and address some issues they saw with leadership, included a bunch of us who were going to be incoming, tried to impact some rules, made a statement with abstaining from supporting Speaker Mattiello. And so, for me, that was just such an eye-opening experience. So for all of us in the House, that experience really sort of sets the tone for the rest of the 2 years. You sort of think that someone should tell you 2 months ahead of time so you can prepare for that. Election night is both fulfilling and fraught. So I think over these 2 years, it's been no secret that people have been speculating about leadership. That was concerning. Anytime there's opposition to leadership, people start to wonder, and it also helps people imagine what other options there are for leaders. So I, being a first-term representative, was expecting that some of the rumors about people running for speaker would come true and that someone would step forward. A few weeks ago, I found that no one was going to step forward, or no one would declare that they would step forward. And as a voter, I haven't spent my life in this political system. I give my colleagues who have been in it for years and decades a lot of credit, but that's not my experience. And I just didn't see how it would be acceptable for us to have an election for a speaker role without it actually being an election with candidates. And the more I saw that there wasn't going to be a candidate that was going to be speaking for me, or one that I could get behind, I felt like I needed to fill that role, and I was happy to, I'm happy to have that field get broader, and I was hoping it would, because I think it makes us better to have more discussion about what we need in a leader. And so that's how I got to this. And I also will say, so many of us are interested in some new leadership. So I felt like there's an unmet need there. So how do we start to fill it?
Yeah, I think it was Minority Leader Filippi. Maybe it was Mike Chippendale, the Minority Whip, who said that the speaker vote is the most important vote that any rep will take during their entire term. Now, you can obviously extrapolate that into make different arguments, but in many ways, that's probably true. And of course, you mentioned the Reform Caucus that, I don't know where it was. I vaguely remember some kind of protest outside of Chapel Grill or something like that a couple of years ago as outgoing Speaker Mattiello was sort of getting the votes in place. So that
was the night of the Democratic caucus. So what's happening tonight, that was that night 2 years ago.
Yeah. And so here we are again, where we see, and look, as the Fenton Fung campaign had sort of played itself out against Speaker Mattiello in District 15, there was already talk, and there has been for some time, that Majority Leader Shekarchi would be kind of next in line. And you represent really breaking up the good old boys club. And I use that term loosely because, I mean, it can seem disrespectful, but in many ways, that's the reality, is that you have a different physical demographic that you'd bring to the table, but also from an idea standpoint, you have a package of ideas that may differ greatly from that of Majority Leader Shekarchi or anyone else who may be kind of the names that are kind of floated right now. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? What would your speakership look like, and how would it differ from, in terms of priorities and goals? How would it differ from a Shekarchi, Joe Shekarchi having the gavel?
Yeah. So I think, the first point you were making that, that there's been a succession of white men, who have held this seat. It's not it's not just a random set of people. It's a set of people who set up for the next man and the next man and the next man. So the system really has worked well for those who are in that role. And ultimately, it has not shown that it has the capacity to be representative of our whole body or our whole state. And so the way I picture that we together as the whole body can do the work better is to not concentrate so much power in that speaker role. So the speaker essentially, by practice and by structure, has the ability to politicize every decision in the building. Not every speaker has done it. And I would also argue that Speaker Mattiello didn't politicize everything. He kept the trains running, and that's the role. It's a management role as much as it's a political role. But the tendency has shown that the use of that role becomes a bit of micromanaging and politicizing some of the pieces. There is not a voter that I have ever talked to who is satisfied with how the General Assembly runs. We all envision something that looks a bit more democratic. There are 75 people in that room that are hired by the people of this state to represent them. And so if one of those people gets to decide what the other 74 vote on, that to me does not represent what people sent us there for. How we structure that, there's room for innovation in how that happens. And I believe that, there's a message out there right now that people want us to be a united body. And that's fabulous. People with diverse points of view can work very well together, but it has to be a respectful, structured process that is inclusive and has many voices at the leadership table, not just the voices that leadership wants to hear from.
Let me ask you this, because this is probably one of the most pressing issues right now for forever, well, not forever, but for my life, for sure, at least my political life, politically aware life. The Rhode Island Speaker of the House is the most powerful figure in Rhode Island politics, in the sense of controlling agendas, and just even in the sense of the politics that happen behind the scenes, let's say. And during COVID-19, with just sort of the process that has been undertaken by the governor and the choice to not convene on the part of the General Assembly, despite pressure from certainly the Republican caucus and even privately and publicly members of the Democratic Party. The speaker's role has been possibly diminished for the first time to second to the governor. That raises questions about oversight. That raises questions about the General Assembly doing its job. In fact, Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, incoming Rep Fenton-Fung, says that's one of the major things that she believes put her over the top in District 15. If you were speaker, would you convene the full body, and what sort of oversight would you bring to the table from an immediate standpoint beginning in January to try to balance out, if you will, the political, the three branches of government here in Rhode Island?
Sure. Yeah. We have had a missed opportunity all year when it comes to oversight of the COVID funding, oversight of the COVID decision-making. We need to come up with a way to meet virtually. This is our reality. A tremendous amount of business securely gets done through virtual meetings, kind of like the one we're having now. Yep. There is capacity, and legislatures around the country and probably around the world have figured out how to do it. There has not been very much appetite for how to do it. There isn't even, as far as I can tell, appetite for doing that for our Democratic caucus today, which is very concerning, and quite a number of us have brought that up at this point. We have existing committees that are capable of doing some of this oversight. There's the Oversight Committee. Yep. There's the task force that was created for oversight of the COVID funds. As long as we know that we're bringing the right people into those conversations who bring a skill set and kind of the right dynamics to actually get the work done, it's no secret that there are challenges between the different personalities in the State House, but ultimately we need to be driven by getting to solutions. And, I would say, I've been calling a lot of my colleagues, and we're all concerned about the spending of the CARES money. We're all concerned about the schools. We're all concerned about the fact that we missed out on getting so much work done this year. Where everyone is interested in getting back to work. We just need to figure out how to do it safely for everyone and in a way that's inclusive.
Discover over 200 episodes of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast, on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your pods, or head over to our website, ripodcast.com. What are your budget priorities if hypothetically you were elevated to speaker? It's going to be a challenge, no doubt about that. I mean,
of course.
What about things like truck tolls, the car tax phase out? I mean, those are obviously minor details in the grand scheme of things right now, the way the budget's shaping up. But what would your priorities be? Are you comfortable with a $10 billion budget? And how would you sort of manufacture consent amongst the body writ large to your agenda?
Mm-hmm. I think that we have so much to deal with this budget. There's so much, there's so many approaches to it, right? First of all, I would like our body in general to be more involved in the budget process. It's, to some extent it gets left up to the finance committee, and we need everybody. We need the folks representing the communities whose nursing homes have been just so hard hit. We need people who are representing the care workers to really be in it and asking the hard questions. We cannot balance this budget on the backs of the vulnerable this year. I think people are very afraid. We have, homelessness issues, housing security, access to healthcare, people who have been without wages for months and months. We have folks who are sliding into poverty. I don't think truck tolls are important, and we need to figure out what the balance is for that. But we have people who are hungry and dying and homeless, and that is not hyperbole at this point. And we need to invest in the care economy that can help people get back and have stable lives, and the critical care infrastructure. When we think about the care economy, those are jobs, we talk about like attracting jobs to the state. We have a lot of work here in the state in the critical care infrastructure, nursing homes, childcare, mental health services. Our investment in those sectors of our economy are going to be critical to the future stability. And I think so we need to, some of the conversations are hard conversations, but some of them are, look, let's not continue to make the poor poor.
Yeah, I think it was about, I don't know, a month and a half ago now on the state, the north lawn of the State House, not the lawn, the north portion of the State House, the justice budget that was called for, many different advocacy groups from the spiritual community, from the sort of activist community, and then some members of the General Assembly as well were up on stage talking about the importance of educational equity, healthcare equity, prison reform, things of this sort. Would you adopt that sort of justice budget as a priority? And what would be, I guess, within that, and they're all important, so it's kind of it's not really the greatest question ever, but what would be sort of the most important aspect to you right now to really make sure, all right, we've got affordable housing done, we've got prison reform done, we've got police reform done, Leobor reform, whatever it may be within your capabilities, but pushing to do whatever you can from that position of Speaker of the House?
That particular event, if I was there and listening, and one of my big concerns is just that we have a budget that really it makes sense for criminal justice. I think our criminal justice system is a perpetuator of our systemic racism, and we need to figure it out and stop investing in systems that will perpetuate more social problems. And I think everybody needs to be at the table. One of the things that struck me about that particular event was there are a lot of voices that come to the State House, but their sound doesn't trickle up to the decision-making levels. And I would like to see kind of not just a speaker, because no one person can do this. It's having a leadership team that truly listens to all of the voices that are coming and are stakeholders invested in the outcome of the expenditures of the state. We have some tendencies that are a result of that, handoff leadership model that we've been doing, where since you happen to be a white male, I'll use you as the example. If you're the next in line, the relationships that the person before you had tend to transfer to you. And so we keep perpetuating a small number of people who have influence on the leadership or even have the ear. I don't think it's an intentional effort. Obviously, we've been raised in systems that have, patriarchy and racist roots. So we need to think how we make sure that there's equity and inclusion in the voices we're hearing and the voices we're actually taking into account when we make decisions.
Last couple of minutes, Majority Leader Shekarchi has put forth a list of, I don't have it in front of me, but a lot of names, we'll say, of folks that are, Rep Williams, folks who are, from a diversity of backgrounds. Do you have a list of your own of people who would elevate you to speaker? And do you believe that folks who appear on Joe Shekarchi's list of votes he's counting his eggs too soon, so to speak, that you've actually got some of those names on a list up for yourself?
I really am not sure how that tactic works. I think that's a complicated move for any candidate. I think that we have, what I have gotten into this race for is to have a fair election. Somebody wins and somebody loses. The history of the State House is if you vote against leadership, you get punished. I know that from experience. The point of this is to prove that actually in the House, we can have a fair election. I don't take that as a particular strategic move that indicates that we will, but this is where we are. This is what we're doing. I don't have any insight into sort of what motivated that particular choice.
Last question. So the Speaker of the House, it's obviously a statewide position. So from Narragansett to Nasonville, or whatever, the completely overused Westerly to Woonsocket, whatever,
It's convenient that they were done that way.
Really, I think it was intentional. I'm pretty sure that's why the map was drawn up exactly like that. I was trying to go across the state as well. I don't know.
It doesn't quite have the same ring. No.
Yeah, exactly. So, unfortunately. But from Aquidneck Island to Ashaway, what's your message? There we go. What's your, let's say you have a chance to meet with one person from every community in the state right now, from different political backgrounds, different personal backgrounds. How do you unify this state right now? You look at the map and the presidential, it's a divide of red interior, blue exterior, well, coastal, I suppose, for the most part. But there's also other ways to look at that left-right divide, concerns about the environment, concerns about solar infrastructure and how that impacts really an apolitical conversation when you look at the rural versus suburban and urban elements of that one example. How do you bring everybody together in this tiny little state that has so many different nuances?
Yeah. I think everybody in this state wants to be able to trust that the folks at the State House are using their tax dollars effectively and efficiently, without waste. And I think they want to be confident that we're getting the basics done right, that we're keeping the roads safe, that we're keeping the schools safe. There's some very basic things we share across all those different divides, urban, rural, whatever, new to Rhode Island, 4 generations of Rhode Island. We all want to make sure that this works well, you're not wasting, you're not corrupt, and that you'll listen to the people of Rhode Island. Those are universal. We don't have anything that is more universal than that. And right now, I don't know that there's any voter that can say they feel that way. I'd like us to move in that direction. That is a Herculean task. I'm not going to lie, but I want to make sure that whoever's in leadership knows that we should be moving in that direction.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey, don't miss out on all that B-Town has to offer. Join the Facebook group by heading to btown.stream. You'll find my live streams from Governor Raimondo's weekly COVID-19 press conferences, from all the different protests and activities happening in the field, and much more. That's btown.stream. We'll take you to the Bartholomew Town Podcast Facebook group.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.